All right, this is Chester Moore here at the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit, and this is an event brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation and Women Hunt, and we have an incredible panel here. We have from Women Hunt, we have Miss Renee Thornton. We have the president and CEO of the Wild Sheep Foundation, Gray Thornton. We have the Desert Bighorn Program Leader for Texas Parks and Wildlife, Froylan Hernandez. And we have Dr. Sam Cunningham, who's on the board of the Wild Sheep Foundation and is the president of the Texas Bighorn Society. So welcome to our panel discussion. Now, back in December, there was a really incredible event that took place out in the Franklin Mountains, and 4 out of the 5 of us were there for it, watching the restoration of desert bighorn sheep to the Franklin Mountains for the first time in around 100 years. And Froylan, I want to start with you. As Texas Parks and Wildlife representative here, what did that particular event mean for the department and the future of the desert bighorn in Texas?
No, that was a monumental project for everyone involved. And to me, the success of that program or of that project will set the stage for the future of desert bighorn sheep in Texas. And I say that because Elephant Mountain is currently the only disease-free population that we have in West Texas, in Texas in general. But it's disease-free because of work being done right now, but it's not impenetrable. And so there's Aoudad all around that. As we know, Aoudad pose that disease risk. And so it's only a matter of time before disease gets into that herd. And so the Franklin Mountains is Aoudad free, disease free, very defensible, great habitat, everything there. All the ingredients are there for that herd to do well. And once it does well, then we'll continue doing captures and relocations from the Franklin. So it's a critical, crucial point. We're at a crucial point, but it's a big piece, if not the biggest piece, for the future of desert bighorn restoration in Texas.
Well, Sam, being president of a group that's fully focused on desert bighorns in Texas, and the group's been around for many years now, how crucial was this from your perspective of seeing this organization where there were almost no sheep to where we had historical levels? Now we're back down low into that moment when that first ram came out of the trailer.
Yeah, it was big for our organization from starting back in 1981 with Dr. Red Duke when there were no sheep, and worked with Parks and Wildlife and got those sheep up, like you said, to historic levels. And then with this recent disease problem we have now, that watching that plummet back down, just to echo what Froy said, the success of this translocation is going to be the success of the sheep program and of sheep in Texas, for sure.
Gray, the mission statement of the Wild Sheep Foundation is to put and keep wild sheep on the mountain. And so it takes a lot to put and keep wild sheep on the mountain. So when this project was born, what all assets had to be put together, because Wild Sheep Foundation was a major contributor to this, to helping facilitate this?
Chester, you look at what it takes to not only put wild sheep on a mountain, but keep them there. And it takes an incredible collaboration, incredible partnership. You look at what Texas Bighorn Society has done through the years with Texas Parks and Wildlife. That is an exceptional collaboration. And then the partnership with Wild Sheep Foundation is collaboration, but it goes a lot further. About 3 years ago, we were looking at how we executed our grant and aid. Wild Sheep Foundation is very, very successful at raising money. We're also very generous in giving that money away. But the critical thing that we started to look at is how impactful are we in all those actions. We started looking at legacy projects, and a legacy project to me is, and not that a $5,000 and $10,000 and $15,000 grant is small change, but that level of funding doesn't provide a catalyst for others to support it. Where, with Sam coming to the Wild Sheep Foundation and saying, look, we have this opportunity. And it's not only an opportunity, as Sam pointed out, but it's probably the last best hope for desert bighorn sheep in Texas. And so he's saying, we have this project that's going to be a legacy for the Lone Star State. So that's really what we're now looking for in funding, is legacy projects where we can put 50, 100, 150, 250, nearly 300,000 is what the Wild Sheep Foundation grant was to Texas Bighorn Society in support of Texas Parks and Wildlife on this. But what it also did is it provided catalysts for others to join. So Bass Pro Shops Cabela's from a commercial side joined in on this project. A partner from the East Coast, a long way from bighorn sheep and desert bighorn sheep, Campfire Club of America, joined in as a collaborator and a funding partner. A Midwest chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation up in Minneapolis gave money. So it's a maybe a cliche, but it's a family. It's a Wild Sheep family coming together, partnering with one of our chapters and affiliates that it's in state. That is our eyes and ears and boots on the ground, TBS, working with an agency partner, Texas Parks and Wildlife, to make this happen, and providing a lasting legacy for desert bighorns.
And another part of the equation that I saw at the capture and even in advance of this with a Guzzler construction was, just blood, sweat, and tears, volunteerism. And Renee, I know that you were excited to be part of this historic capture and release. And we've even had people from Women Hunt get involved in things like creating Guzzler. Can you talk about that part of contributing to sheep restoration?
Yeah, it really was such a momentous thing for me to participate in, and it was the first time I'd ever had an opportunity to volunteer in a trap and translocation. So I was there as a private citizen, and you're right, so many of these projects, from this very critically important one to a myriad of others, rely on volunteers stepping up to help out. And it was transformative and amazing. And to your early question or comment, seeing that the first sheep being released at the release site was an incredible culmination to a couple days of incredible work. So it really was tremendous, and I was privileged to be there and be part of it.
Now, Gray, these types of projects and different facets happen all around the nation, all around the continent in some way. Testing animals, test and remove, translocations, restoration projects. But in terms of in modernity here, this seems like one of the bigger projects that had some of the highest stakes.
And Sam brought it up, Froylan did as well. You look at what has happened in Texas with desert bighorn sheep restoration. I think the last desert bighorn was taken from the landscape in the mid-late 60s. Is that correct, Froylan? But their highs were around 1,800 to maybe 2,000 bighorn sheep back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. They were extirpated by 1968, let's say. To Sam's point, those sheep were brought back from 0 to about 1,800 desert bighorn sheep in the state. Now we're down to less than 600. And it's a disease complex, which wild sheep are so resilient when it comes to the landscape they live on naturally, whether it's the highest mountains, the coldest temperatures, some of the most arid and hottest desert mountains. But from a respiratory standpoint, they're very susceptible to challenges. In this case, pneumonia, which is brought on about a pathogen that, as we now know, is called Mycoplasma pneumoniae. There's various vectors for that pathogen. Typically, it has been from domestic stock, domestic sheep and goats. It can be the bighorn sheep themselves. Typically, they are naive to this pathogen. Typically, when they come in contact with a vector that transmit the pathogen to them, somewhat like a cold or a flu or COVID, they die. However, there are situations where there's kind of the typhoid Mary, where one or more of the bighorn sheep don't die, and they become super shedders. Well, so now you've got a situation where bighorn sheep are transmitting it to bighorn sheep. In the case of Texas, it's somewhat unique. It's actually an exotic species, which was brought to the state by Texas Parks and Wildlife as a huntable species, and it seemed to be a good idea at the time. But as Sam has pointed out in future or earlier discussions, while the exotic Aoudad or Barbary sheep was brought into Texas in the 1930s, 1940s, and they had kind of a slow and steady increase in population, which was a linear growth in nature, became a exponential logarithmic growth. And at that point, we started to see a subsequent linear but also exponential drop in the desert bighorn sheep. They became the pathogen vector that impacted the desert bighorn. So, in this case, we've got a novel disease or novel pathogen brought on by, again, something that we as humans have brought onto the landscape. And so it's going to be our job to fix it. One thing I got to say for Texas, though, if there is any other jurisdiction, certainly in this country, and I would say even in the world, that has a can-do, pull up the bootstraps, we're going to get it done, we can say yes, and yes, we're going to do it, it's this state and these people. So if there's a way to fix this, Texas is going to figure it out.
Absolutely. No, Sam is very passionate about this Aoudad issue. And just when you first got involved with the Desert Bighorn program and just wanting to get involved with sustaining this population, did you ever foresee Aoudad at the time? Because I don't ever remember that being in a conversation years and years ago that they were a problem.
As far as a problem, no. Gray was very gracious a while ago when he said that I came to Wild Sheep Foundation with an opportunity. I came with my hat in my hands, man, we got a problem and we need help. And that's how that worked out. It was an opportunity for them, but it was a life-saving, problem-solving thing for us. As far as the Aoudad, when they came in, some were put in Paldera Canyon up near Amarillo, and the rest were put in the Trans-Pecos area. And great, they're out there, they're huntable species. Hey, we saw one, and now that we're where we are, it's a huge problem. With like them or hate them, you have to admire their resilience and just their tenacity for reproduction. It's just at a whole new level with highly adaptive animal. They can go from browsers to grazers to back, and then they can survive anywhere.
Absolutely. Froylan, you and I were talking earlier on my podcast about some research that's being done on Aoudad and kind of the mystery of when did this strain of Mycoplasma ovopneumoniae get into Aoudad, and you were saying that there were actually multiple strains in Aoudad.
So every time we do any kind of sampling, whether it's bighorn or Aoudad, and we do get positives for that bacteria, we try and strain type it to try and figure out where it came from. And so, not surprisingly, we found that there were goat strains in the strains, and there are also domestic sheep strains. But we also found that there was a novel Aoudad strain. And so when you have that added to the mix, it just complicates the problem, because you can do something about the domestic sheep, you can do something about the domestic goats, but what do you do about the Aoudad that are carrying their own type of strain that's detrimental to sheep? So it's complicated nonetheless, very, very complex.
Another area complex is that Texas is 97% privately owned. And, Aoudad are very popular, and there's a lot of money being made by, Aoudad hunts and things like that. And just for anybody who'd like to answer this, what are some steps being made? Because obviously it's going to take some working with private landowners who are conservation-minded to make, some inroads on this.
Well, and so to me, because Texas is privately owned, the majority of it is, all our state lands, the Texas Parks and Wildlife lands, they have bighorns on them, and we're working to get bighorns on them, and so those we can work with. But there's still lots of mountain ranges that are on private land that don't have bighorns on them, and so the landowner support and cooperation. Without that, we're done. We're done to the lands that have bighorns on them now, and so they were a great and a critical partner when the restoration effort began back in the 50s and 60s, and they continue to be play an important role in the restoration program, and they will continue to play an important role because without their support, there's absolutely no way we can go to continue restoring those mountain ranges that are uninhabited by bighorns.
One thing, we talk about the Aoudad and their disease transmission because that's sort of the latest and greatest and in everybody's face issue. But the Aoudad are really hard on habitat. And so recently, landowners have come to Parks and Wildlife, come to TBS and said, hey, we need help with these Aoudad. They're wrecking our habitat. So if there's 80,000 Aoudad on the landscape, it's like having 80,000 lawnmowers going 24 hours a day. They just really are rough on the habitat. And so now that's affecting domestic livestock production and cattle production, mule deer populations, and really hard on everything.
And a reason Franklin Mountains, you briefly mentioned this earlier, was chosen because it's Aoudad free. There's no domestic stock right there. And there's kind of a buffer zone with the city of El Paso and everything. I guess part of this on private land is that finding places that are willing to manage Aoudad, because you said Texas Parks and Wildlife's not out trying to eliminate people's Aoudad herd. You're trying to find creative ways to manage Aoudad herds with some of your studies and things you're doing right now.
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess I should clarify that early on, we kind of did this to ourselves in terms of we would say Aoudad are detrimental to bighorn, Aoudad are detrimental to bighorn. And that was, it began and it stopped there. But then we started looking at a bigger picture. And the bigger picture, well, how do they impact mule deer? And there's a lot more landowners that have mule deer than there are Aoudad. And so we looked at that perspective. But then there's also landowners that have livestock on their property. And so we went on to look at how is it impacting livestock. And so we're looking at the at the bigger picture, but as Sam mentions, all that is the wildlife thing is one thing, but once the habitat is gone, it doesn't matter if you're talking about a pronghorn or mule deer or bighorn or Aoudad or cow. Once the food has gone off the landscape, then nothing survives on it, and so the habitat is now a part of the equation. And so the more you look into it, the complexity grows. And with that complexity come more questions and those kinds of things. And so I don't see an end in sight. I wish I could wave a wand and say, Aoudad be gone, and poof, they're gone. But that's not the case. That's not going to be the case. And so, again, we're changing our tune. We did it to ourselves by saying we're going to eliminate the Aoudad. One, that's not an achievable goal. And it's not an achievable goal because of just the sheer number of Aoudad. But then also because there are landowners that are making that supplemental income off of hunts that want them, and I respect that. I get that. And so, those two things they require us to look at it differently, to change our mindset, to look at it and say, okay, we'd like for them to be gone, but they're not going to be gone. So how can we work with everything that's out on the table, and Aoudad are now at the table?
Jester, and some of the comments that are being said, point out something very, very clear. And we're talking about wildlife management, but we're also talking about people management. And I took some courses years back from a guy named Dr. Gene Decker, and he said wildlife management is people management, first and foremost. One of the interesting things in Texas is, for the most part, desert bighorn sheep are not visible. You can go to Alpine, you can go to Marfa, you can go to the west of the Pecos there, and you've got to drive a long way to try to see a desert bighorn. One of the exciting things about this project is it has now put this iconic, exceptional, visceral resource in the backyard of a huge population center, El Paso. And, we overuse this statement, that if it pays, it stays. But I'll take that a little step further. If it's visible and valued, it stays. If this iconic resource is known only to a few in Texas, it's not going to be a priority. If it's known to a lot of people, and now moving the sheep to Franklin Mountain State Park, the back door of El Paso, there are going to be more and more people aware of this resource and the value it plays and has to the state of Texas. And so I'm bullish from the standpoint of, more people being aware of desert bighorn sheep or bighorn sheep, more people being cognizant of the challenges that this species have, more people valuing that species, is going to be more emphasis on finding solutions, more money to find solution, and certainly the political will to find a solution and execute on that solution.
Renee, a part of your testimony is you're an adult onset hunter. You have this and you really work through Women Hunt adult onset hunters. And it's been interesting to me just see kind of a glimpse into Women Hunt, how women may come from the East, never seen a bighorn, maybe didn't even know about them for a while. What is it about, do you think, about like the wild sheep issue and wild sheep in particular that seem to turn these people, these newer hunters, on fire for conservation? Because as Gray said, more awareness, you may have a whole new breed of sheep conservation that's come up in El Paso. So from your perspective, why do you think that is, that the sheep in particular just get people fired up?
That's a really great question. And I have the benefit of having grown up in Alberta, Canada, where we have beautiful Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. And for myself, our family spent a lot of time in the Rocky Mountains, and whether it was winter skiing or summer backpacking and hiking. So I always had the great privilege of seeing bighorn sheep throughout my lifetime. For me, they're iconic, and they're the most magnificent wildlife species in North America, in my opinion, right? So when I've asked myself that question, this very question, our program, Women Hunt, is a program of the Wild Sheep Foundation. So we operate under the Wild Sheep Foundation umbrella. And especially in our infancy, when we launched our program, we relied on great partners like TBS and other chapters and affiliates to help us recruit interested women in our program to come out to become hunters, to get hunter training and conservation education. We've grown way past that now. We're getting so much traction that we're attracting applicants from all over the place, including internationally now. And many of these women, some of them actually don't even know what a wild sheep is. And some of them know, but they've never seen one. And they certainly don't know anything about the very tangible issues that face the resource. And they very quickly become absolutely impassioned evangelists for wild sheep. It's extraordinary how some of them have just dove right in, and they love this species. And, I've never really thought to canvass them, but I think I'm going to now. But I do know that from many of the comments anecdotally that I've heard, when they start to learn about wild sheep and the different types of wild sheep we enjoy in North America, and they start to observe their behaviors, whether it's through videos or photography, or if they are able to get out and observe them themselves, and they seem to just fall in love with them, much like many of us who love wild sheep do. I also think that they're really blessed to be part of a wild sheep family, both with the Wild Sheep Foundation and all our CNAs. where they come in direct contact with these impassioned conservationists who tell such a compelling story about the challenges the species face. So I think it's a combination of the grandeur of the species and the magnificent of rams butting heads to the charming delight of little lambs on the landscape to really shocking realizations about the challenges of the species.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah, to kind of touch on what Gray was talking about with the exposure and making that a more visible resource. When Froy and the Parks and Wildlife Department were going through and, surveying the Franklin Mountain State Park and doing the habitat studies, the water and everything, Parks and Wildlife and TBS partnered together, and Froy and Jose Eckert, who's the biologist in the El Paso region, we put on 3 public outreach programs. So the people of El Paso could come and ask questions and learn about the sheep program and see pictures. And the Franklin Mountain State Park is very busy. It's got like 80,000 visitors a year. And so there were some things floating around out there about, they put these sheep in here, they're going to close our hiking trails or they're going to close our bike trails. And so we had that series of 3 seminars to sort of dispel some of the myths around it. And then on the release, from when we got the trailers of sheep to Franklin Mountain State Park, you pull up there to release them, and there was 600 people? 600 people just there to watch, which was pretty powerful.
Just very anecdotally, I've had more people texting, emailing, sharing stuff on Instagram from the Franklin Mountains release than all the years I've ever written about wild sheep on any single issue. People were like jacked about it, and so that's a very good sign. I know Froy and I talked earlier about how it was very intentional of like engaging the public, like you said, with these meetings and everything. But we all know, all of us on this panel are hunters. And we all know that the majority of conservation for these game species are paid, or at least the catalyst for its hunters. Maybe it's through Pittman Robertson, through groups like the Wild Sheep Foundation, or maybe the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, different categories of wildlife. The sheep issue is different because there's pressing issues of things like disease. What would any of you say to a hunter out there who maybe is thinking, maybe one day I could pull a tag or win a raffle, but maybe I never will? Why do you think we need to get more hunters who maybe aren't traditional sheep hunters to take up the cause of sheep conservation?
And you spoke on this the other night, Chester, and it's knowing that they're there. There's something very spiritual about something that we may aspire to, we may dream of, but we may never get to. And so I think when it comes to wild sheep, they live in the loftiest of places, and those that have read Jack O'Connor books or read some of the great writers that talked of sheep hunts of past, had that as a dream. And I think there is a factor of that unattainable, and to many, and certainly to me, I thought I'll never take one of those things. I'll never be able to hunt one of those things. But eventually you start to prioritize life to do what you dream of. And whether, that's Renee going to all 7 continents and achieving that, there's so few people in this world that have, to a hunter saying, you know what, I didn't grow up with a golden spoon in my mouth, but I am going to make the sacrifices. I am going to work hard. I am going to hopefully get lucky, and you can be that too for sheep hunting, and hunt those animals. I think it's a dream, and dreamers do big things to realize those dreams. So I think that's a big part of sheep hunting. It is a dream. And, it might be someone else's dream to go to Africa for the first time, whether it's to hunt or whether it's to photo safari. I think those lofty things that we look at and those aspirational things that we look at are powerful to us because they make us get up in the morning, go through the day, and go through the day with a purpose. And I can tell you, sheep hunters have purpose.
Absolutely. So just kind of our final wrap-up question. We'll start with Sam and go all the way down. What's an on-ramp for someone to get involved in wild sheep conservation or becoming a hunter conservationist? What can, I think some people think, oh, I got to have a lot of money or I got to live out west or whatever. Tell me different ways people can put some skin in the game and really make a difference, whether it's at the Franklin Mountains or it's, in the Yukon.
Yeah, man, just get involved. In Texas, if Desert Bighorn sheep is your thing, you can join the Texas Bighorn Society. Go to our website, texasbighornsociety.org. There's opportunities to join. There's opportunities to participate in our work projects, and we can hook you up with. We have an Adopt a Guzzler program where a lot of people join that, and then they're given GPS coordinates of our guzzlers by the Parks and Wildlife guys, and they hike up and do repairs and monitor those. So, there's tons of ways to get involved in Texas.
Yeah, to me, it's educate yourself on the issues, on the complexity, and then once you educate yourself, be engaged. And engaged to me is not necessarily going out and hunting and doing those things. While that's great, some folks may not have those opportunities. And so if you educate yourself and you're engaged, the one thing you can do, and we can all do, and certainly me in my case I can do better, is talk about those things. Spread the story. I like to say spread the gospel. Go out and tell folks, hey, this is an issue, and it's an issue, not just a bighorn issue. You got all kinds of wildlife issues, habitat issues, concerns. So again, educate yourself, and then be engaged. And that's, to me, the best engagement is that if you can't go and do it yourself, then at least tell others about it. And once the story grows, then you get that movement moving forward.
Wild Sheep Foundation has chapters and affiliate throughout North America, and actually throughout the world. We've got affiliates in Central Asia as well. But we just started a new chapter, the Southeastern chapter, and it's based right now in Florida. It may move around, but we have wild sheep advocates in Florida. We have the Eastern chapter, so Northeast. Midwest chapter that handles Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Iowa chapter. And then you start to come west in the states, provinces, territories that have sheep. And we have chapters and affiliates through all those. So it doesn't really matter where you live. You can get involved. And, to Froylan's point, which I think is so poignant, evangelize. He said spread the gospel, evangelize. And whether it's for wild sheep, or elk, or mule deer, or turkey, or quail, evangelize for that resource. How do you do that? You do get involved. You get involved with what organization that you may have that are people like you, because there's something about, and we're seeing at this conference, in this podcast, the Huntfish Podcast Summit, very diverse people from amazing backgrounds that come together. And within 30 minutes, we're all friends. So there's something about getting involved in a local group of people that are like you, share the same interests, share the same passion, that can launch you into so many different directions. If it's to wild sheep conservation, great. If it's a mule deer conservation, great. Pronghorn, ducks, quail, doesn't really matter. Get involved.
Yeah, for myself, when I decided to learn to hunt as a solo adult onset hunter, I made the conscious choice of adopting a practice I was raised with, which was to go in a position of service. And so I would strongly encourage anybody who's interested in wild sheep conservation or just hunting and conservation in general to consider humbling yourself and going in a position of service. So connecting with the many, many organizations that exist, whatever your interest is, whether it's angling or hunting or anything else in the realm, seek out those organizations. It's pretty easy in this day and age to pathfind to that, and show up and ask them, how can I help? And make sure your mind is open and receptive to new ideas, even ones that make you uncomfortable. When I say that, what I mean is that when I started my journey, I was really confused about African hunting. I didn't know how it made me feel uncomfortable, and I couldn't define why. But I went in with an open mind and asking questions. And so I would suggest that approach of service and receptivity to new and different ideas will allow you to quickly synthesize and make decisions for yourself about what feels right, and then go forth and help the resource.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here on the panel at the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit 2025, and thank you for what you do for wild sheep and hunter advocacy and conservation.